Hello. So we're on the Decklist videos again, and this is going to be potentially a very boring one. So I will save some people some time. If you are familiar with what everyone's playing in terms of Dirtlander, there's very little in here for you. This is more just a rundown of what is in the deck that nearly everybody is playing. I have very few deviations from what is currently super meta. I'm going to make the bold statement of I arrived there on my own. I was playing this about the same time everyone else was. The dropping of three was like really organic at the time they put Arcane Compliance out. So I think you know at least a dozen people who are into Verdance in a big way all independently went, yeah, we're done with AMP basically. Um, because the resources you put into something like Tree only makes sense when you get a big payoff. So keeping Tree for 2 turns with Surgeon in play gets you like 12 value from 2 cards, which is super good. The second you start putting Compliance in there and going, you actually only get about 6 value if you're lucky, it becomes a bad choice, right? So that then forces you onto, well, how do I play it? And you immediately arrive at basically playing Dirtlander. For anyone wondering why it's got the nickname Dirtlander, it's because Icelander played a Bullander deck, which was a wizard who ran all the generic 0 for 7s. Because it turned out that punching people for 7 when they don't plan to block anyway is way more efficient than, a 2-card wizard 3. Arcane damage is only good if someone is trying to prevent it and does not have the ability to prevent it. If you think about it, it's basically like a three cap dominate in most cases. So, with that said, I'll go through the basics of this. Bark Skin, Plume, Stonewall, Striders, and Waning Moon make up the bulk of your games. Stonewall is, in my opinion, the best choice. If you are trying to save some money, go for Blade Beckoner. It's nearly as good. I would run both if there was any space in the deck, but the deck is so full on the sideboard, as you'll see in a bit. What we've got is Plume, because Plume turns into a Felling in a lot of games, which is just amazing, and because it can also enable Rampant Growth shenanigans. One Rampant can get a ton of value from having a Plume. It's the right choice in the majority of your matchups. Like, if in doubt, Plume does not normally go wrong. You want it for Prism so that you can pick up 7s from your Red Fruits of the Forest. You want it in any slow game so you can combo. You don't mind it in most fast games because it turns a 2-blue hand into a Felling hand. And it keeps your Decompose train rolling a little bit as well, because obviously you pick up Felling, but it puts an Earth card back in, so then you only need one other Earth card to decompose into that Felling. It's generally just good. I don't really need to explain Striders to people, right? But very, very simply, Striders now has 3 targets. It has Burn Bear, which will very soon be getting refitted to I can't remember the real name. Razor Leaf, I keep calling it because it just looks like a Pokemon attack. Is it Burning Leaves? Burn the Leaves? Anyway, it's basically the same card, except it pitches for red, and it had different inconsequential text at the bottom. But it's a 6 damage free that is red rather than white, which is pretty much an automatic upgrade in most people's eyes. The only problem with that's going to put even more pressure on the sideboard because Burn Bear is very good into Prism. So who knows what space there is for what. That's going to need some testing, and I won't be getting testing done until it's actually out. I am personally on 6 Cadaverous Tillings. So 3 red because it swings for 8, really good. I'm also on the 3 blues. That is because it is a mixture of a reasonable block. I'd love to go 3 blocks, but I really, really needed more earth. And the other thing is because it decomposes itself, it tends to dig you out of sort of problem places. So I'd be happy to go down to 2. I just don't really have anything else I want to put in the deck right now. The second I think of something else I want, I'll probably go to 2. But it basically just shows up your ability to decompose. So you have 6 tillings and your 3 root bounds. Gives you 9 cards that decompose as your first decompose of the game. And that's the really important part. Because Plough is a perfectly good decomposer, Felling's an amazing decomposer, but you ideally never want it to be your first decompose because you're only getting, Felling's okay as your first decompose. You don't want to, but it is still actually pretty solid value because it's a 2-card 7 roughly. If you assume a card in your opponent's hand is worth about 3 value, it's a 2-card 7 even if it's not hitting, it's Earth Pump. So yeah, if it skips Leg Day, it's still valid. This is crap, basically. Two cards for 2 damage as your first decompose is very average, and it's up to 5 when you take the arsenal off them, I guess, but it's just not progressing the board state at all. I would rather block out with it every day of the week. So that's, I would say the focus is almost always to try and bring your 9 decomposers that aren't Felling and Plough. I think that's kind of the ballpark we've settled on, around 9. Maybe 8, but that region. If you are very bothered about Prism, you might want to consider some of this tilling being right name. Blanking. The one that took Sora's. I'm sorry, I'm not doing well on remembering the cards' names at the moment. I tend to know what cards do rather than the names for a lot of them because the name's normally inconsequential. And there's a lot of cards to remember, right? So, the one that takes an aura versus the one that hits really hard versus the one that takes a card from your hand is adequate information for me. So, that's the decompose component talked about. Command and Conquer's in there because it's Command and Conquer. Enlightened Strike has crept into nearly all the decks because it's a 7 damage 2-card thing. And because it, especially currently, it works really well with things like Burn Bear because if you draw Burn Bear early and want it for later in the game, you can bottom it, which is quite handy. But it's that thing of you can have an Enlightened Strike and just have an all red hand to still make a turn. Especially when it's in Arsenal, it can be extra godsend because you draw a Burn Bear and 3 reds or something, and you go, right, well I block with 3 of these and I E-strike for 7 still. It keeps your momentum up. And Verdance is very, very big on not giving up a turn. If you have a turn where you have cards left in your hand and you go, oh, I'm not swinging, you're probably lost. If you keep track of those moments in games, it is often where you have lost the game, where you go, oh, I just skipped 7 damage, and now I'm 7 behind in the race, and I will never get it back. Because I think she is the proper true tempo deck of the game right now. I'm sure some of the Guardians will creep back in to this as we go, but she's all about how do I split my hand up to optimize blocking and damage and race you down correctly, and you walk your life total down with them in most games, and then they go into the kill zone faster. Possibly worth mentioning as well, that kill zone is around 7 to 9 depending on things. You've got your Burn Bear for 6 into a Waning Moon for 3, or you've got your Pulsing Ethers and your Emeritus Scaldings. Ether is just a sort of generically efficient card. There's not much else to it. It's Earth, it blocks 3. That's the golden numbers for Verdance pretty much. The Fruits of the Forests, the blue ones have always been good. The red ones have crept into the list because while Sigil is good, you can't decompose it, and that's been proving to be very, very helpful. Also, this just gives you another good popper, and it gives you a pretty much guaranteed popper into Prism. And I think most Prisms are no longer running the reaction that takes 2 power off people's attacks because they're finding their sideboard to be a bit tight. So that got kicked out by most of them, I believe, which makes Fruits of the Forest really, really good. You've got your 3 red fruits, you've got your plume. Plume is almost always used to sort of fish up a red fruits and end a turn in Prism. It has some other uses, but it's mostly that. Root Bound is solid. It decomposes, it blocks 4. Perfect. Shelter, it's a 4 block. It's very much just important because it makes your ninja matchups really smooth because it's a flick knife stopper. It does a little bit into ninjas to some degree, but like one thing that I would say is very, very true of Verdance and less true of nearly anyone else is that your sync for lows are not that good. I have looked at these so many times and gone, should I be running Fate for Sea? Because I think 1 in 10 times you play sync, you use sync with Verdance, because when you look at your hand, you earmark what you're doing with it. And it's very rare that you get a chance to do a sync and fix your hand and then decide what you're keeping. In most games you are... Yeah, it can depend, but I would say statistically most games you are blocking a 3 before a 4, which means once you've done a block and then a sync, you only have a 2-card hand left and you don't want to sink and gamble on it getting worse. So that's one of the main reasons Shelter is so ubiquitously good in her. It does 2 things. We've covered Plough. I'm currently running Rampant in my main for a lot of games. I really, really just like the Rampant combo. It is why I want to play Verdance. And it's a shame to me a little bit that because of compliance, more than anything in the meta, it feels a little shaky as to whether or not you can run it sometimes. But I think you really can, because Verdances are off mega comboing people, compliance tends to not actually be played. It's the lurking boogeyman. It doesn't actually happen to you because you don't run the stuff that would make them play it, do you? But these get boarded out very, very fast into a lot of matchups, unfortunately. I often keep 2 of them. Put one of something else in. Ring of Roses is just solidly good. You don't play it in most of your games, but it's a 3 block. It's that's the standard for what things that make the cut in Verdance. Being yellow is quite useful because we have it can play a CNC, it can play a pulsing ether and life, and you can meld them. It can play a plough. It does multitask well, and into some of the slower matchups, it can be very, very powerful. If you draw it turn 1 and just flop it, it can be good. It has uses for sure, but it's not an every game card. Twinning has made it in as, I would say, almost filler really, but it's a point of arcane damage that costs nothing. It has the ability to be thrown away if it's in your starting hand to help fill your graveyard, and it's the standard. It's a blue and it's a 3 block. I would say these probably honestly stay in the deck more than anything, just because they cost nothing, and if you're doing the Rampant combo, they can really, really feed into that. And especially if you have boarded Surgeon, they become really, really important for bits and pieces like the mirror and stuff, just because they're a good way of optimizing the combo. Because if you want a pulsing ether off a combo, you have to have that 1 floating, and it doesn't map out well. Things costing 1 is actually a massive problem for the deck. And Touch is a 3 block. Scalding is, again, it's a 3 block blue, but it's also that you frequently make sure you pitch 1 early if you can. If you get to second cycle, it's kind of your finishing piece sometimes, because it gets you 7 off your Waning Moon, which is a big deal for finishing. Everbloom Life is the newest edition. It's the reason Florian's not allowed to exist in the meta, which I think sucks for him, because while this can do things, absolutely can be played to do things. I think 99% of the time, this is again the Verdance basic land thing. You're just on a 3-block, it's blue, it's earth. If it gets stuck in your hand, it's not stuck in your hand. You can play it as an action. That's a big deal. You can play it as a just as a life gain quickly to cycle it out. So on turn 1, you can just throw them all out when your opponent's not trying to attack you and have some bonus life in the graveyard. Part B, same deal, but it does have some explosive turns. It can really weave in with some of your 2 costs and get you some goodness. It's also good because it can pair with Moon, so if you are going for a bit of a combo thing, you can play that with a blue. You've got 2 floating to use Moon to finish. You're getting that 3 value from a blue pit, which is important. Mental Block went in because of Syndra, pretty much. That is why it crept into all the decks several months ago. But we just decided we love it. It's so good into so many things in the meta right now. You can use it to get a 2-block and a new card, which is just a big deal in itself. That is very, very good value. It's effectively 5 value. But it plays around Dominate. It messes up Crushers. It can just do a lot to help you against various matches and covering certain breakpoints and things. When Florian is viable, it does some stuff into him, into Prism. It stops them hitting you with Card Draw Angel. There's a lot going on with that. And Scour is the final one that is sort of omnipresent, even though you don't... you main deck it because it blocks, is the simple description. And it's blue, so it pulls its weight at all times, but it's good into Prism, it's good into Vinset, it's now good into some of the Guardian matchups. It can absolutely ruin Valda's day, because, she'll commit, a proportion of a turn to building auras, and then you just sweep them all for damage, and then she looks at her turn and goes, oh dear. And especially Valdez, who put a big heave card into their arsenal, they're then just sat on it often because they often can't play it, or they're going to have to just absorb the full Scour to the face to play it, which is fine. It will have Dominate, right? So Scour remains... I would say potentially the best wizard card generically, because it just does a lot into a lot of matchups. So that's the rundown of the main list. This is the 60. The things I've got that really vary from anywhere else, I think, is mostly just this Burn Bear. I am on 3 of them. I'm mostly on 3 of them for personal reasons of Prism being a bugbear of mine. I don't find that having 3 messes me up very often. You have Enlightened Strike, you have an Arsenal, you have the ability to block with it, so it's got to be a pretty bad draw for it to really actually screw you up. But it can happen, which is why a lot of people only run 2. I'm certainly not going to be running 3 once the next set lands, but not there yet. And then the place where you actually see some variance is basically the inventory. So Sink Below lives in the inventory here. It's often in people's main with the whole rampant combo living in the sideboard, which, it makes me sad, and I wanted to kind of mention that fact. But, that's in there. Your healing potions, your healing potion with a different name are in there so that you can board them and the rampants into slow matchups and win. Your Surgeon has to go in your board because you need it, or you will probably lose the mirror. The mirror is a complete coin flip, just so people are aware, but for it to be a coin flip, you have to be on Surgeon. I've run Pajamas for a very, very long time, but I've finally cut them because I just do not have space, and because Metacarpus Node is better into Runeblade matchups and Prism do want AB1 into Prism so that you don't just die when you are swinging into her aura stacks. If she sees you with no AB, she will go for a how many spectral shields can I make in the late game with them dealing you a damage on death, and you'll have a horrible time. Crown is in here because into a couple of the really aggro matches, it's a good plan. You don't have to crown. You could absolutely cut this if you wanted the sideboard slot back for something else. I have basically what I'd say are basically your slots is you've got 2, 4. You've basically got 6 slots. You've got Crown, you've got Scarf for Sky, you've got Snag, and you've got a Talishar here. I'm running Snag because it's quite good into Assassins. I mean, very, very good into Assassins, to be honest. I like it as a little gotcha. As a comment, I think this, Poison Well, and Compliance are all cards that shouldn't exist because they punish you for trying to do the mechanic your deck was built around, and they punish you in a horrible way. Like, Snag's like a 9 value block often, even more. If they swing at you with and try and pump it for massive value, you put a small block in, you let them get all the thing up to try and take your hand, and then you just go and snag. I prevent 9 damage and I don't lose any cards from hand. It's incredible value, and it's kind of when it's usable. I do honestly. I would not be sad if this was banned, even though I have a couple of foil ones, just because I think the game state would be better personally. And the same is true of Compliance. Like, ban wizard cards if wizards are too good. Don't make it so that wizards who want to use the amp combo you printed for them are punished. Poison the Well, similar concepts. Like, it's a bit Verdance centric, but like, it's annoying that someone can just bring in hoses and go, "Oh, it's a shame you're a deck based on life gain, isn't it?" I don't like that in the game, but it is what it is. The 2 Scarf for Scars, I think these are going to get cut again, if I'm honest, because I'm so desperate for sideboard space or something else, but they are basically in there to help with Gravy and with Prism, who I find to be our 2 worst matchups because they're board state, and board state's a nightmare. Costing 0 and sometimes having go again is the name of the game. I only have touch space for 2 though, which is mostly because I'm finally on a Talishar. This is a little bit for Gravy. It's quite helpful into him, I think, but it is mostly actually in there for the Prism match. It lets you 3 times a game just use 1 card up to remove problem auras, to delete powerful angels, because you're often forced to having to block really hard to stop Prism getting massive value turns. And the Talishar really takes the pressure off, in my opinion. It's it's sort of a meta call, but it's perfectly good. What I don't normally discuss and what I thought I'd go through this time, I've actually left all my maybes in here. So this is just a list of cards that might one day ever go in the deck. Don't assume any of it's good, but you can sort of see, Pajamas has dropped down into the maybe pile because there's no space, but it's a good choice. It can be very good in certain matchups. Blade Beckoner is good if you've got the space, or it's good if you don't want to spend I think it's about $30 or something for the Stonewalls. There's a lot of things in here that are just in the graveyard. I was going to mention this. This is my secret tech thing, and this is something I do keep thinking about running. This is not too bad into some of the Guardians, but it is mainly a mirror thing. If you run 2 copies of Knick Knack Bric-a-Brac into the mirror, 3 if you had loads of space, I guess, you gain about 10% win rate on them. I would say thereabouts. It becomes like I suppose you technically gain a 20% win rate. You're taking 10% of theirs. You go to about 60-40 in the matchup normally because you actually hit your potions before them. That's huge because the mirror is just who gets to 3+ potions and 2 rampants in hand first, and that person wins the game. And there is unfortunately no skill in the mirror. think much else in the board is that worth talking about at the moment. Seeds is a relevant one-of you could think about sideboarding. I was using Midas Touch for Prism for a while, and it's actually quite good into Gravy because he's got enough gold, giving him an extra like 3 or 4. I don't think messes with the game, honestly. Like, it's not that important. Whereas removing a big guy with Go Again can be important. But it's a bit niche, and I don't know it's the right choice. I'd need more reps to say so. I have considered Earthform a good few times. It's 7, which is a really nice number for killing certain things, and the embodiments are becoming more interesting, I think, as we play the kind of Dirtlander builds. Let you have a look at all the things that have or might make cuts at points. Rewinds in this pile of stuff. I must have accidentally removed it, not maybe'd it last time I was messing with the deck. I've tried 2 rewinds a couple of times because they can really mess with certain matchups. I still don't think it's quite worth it because obviously it's quite inefficient, but it's something to sort of consider if you're trying to cook. I've tried to make this video a bit different from the others because, as I say, like the basic list is quite dull in that if you are into Verdance, you will have seen it already. I'm not doing my own crazy thing at the moment because compliance exists. It kills the crazy things off a lot, which I'm sad about. I don't like that they've removed variants from your list building. Because by no means does compliance it doesn't hurt Verdance because Verdance goes, right, well, I just won't. I will not play things that run into compliance, your move. That's disappointing in itself because it takes away your ability to deck build. Verdance was not solved one set ago, and I think she is solved now. I think realistically there's very little you can do to this main deck to make it better because compliance exists. And as I say, it's not about it being played, it's about, well, it might be played. And if it is played, I will lose a game if I am trying to run into it. Whereas I'm not really losing much avoiding ever running into it. And as I say, from a personal stance, that makes me sad from a design perspective because it's bottlenecking what a class can be. But hopefully that's a good rundown for people who've stuck it out. This has basically been coming up on half an hour, so I'm going to cut it off before we get to that. If you have any questions, drop them in the comments. Send me a DM on Discord. You can find me under Ravnak. And I'll obviously post a copy of this deck list up for people to just grab if they want it. So thanks for watching through. Hope you enjoyed it, and I will see you in the next video.